You are listening to the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. Follow us by visiting MikeRileyNow.com. All right. Hello and welcome everybody to the Mike Riley Now podcast here on the Young Angels of America Network. I am your host, Mr. Mike Riley, of course. Welcome. It is Thursday, April the 20th, 2017. Hello. Say what's up. Of course, I have my amazing and lovely co-host in the house tonight, Miss Charlie Sandy and my girl Cam Robson. Welcome back, ladies. Welcome back from last week. Say hello.
Hi.
And of course, we are broadcasting all the way live on Facebook Live. Hello, Facebook people. And we are also all the way live on Spreaker if you're checking us out on MikeRileyNow.com. Make sure you log on to MikeRileyNow.com and follow us on all the social medias. I want to give a big shout out to all of my followers and all of the people who are listening, all of the people who've been listening from all over the world. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for all the positive feedback we've been getting. So, man, that's been a lot of love. Hello, what's going on, everybody? It's been a crazy week. Happy 420 to all of my to the stoner community out there and all of my people in the cannabis community. We'll be talking about that a little bit more later on in the show in the economics section. I definitely wanted to cover the economics of cannabis and stuff like that, and since it's 420, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit. We won't talk about it too much, but we'll get into it a little bit. So it's been kind of a crazy week since the last time we all spoke, and it always is. I swear, there's like never a dull moment in the world these days. I mean, just to kind of start things off a little bit, we started off this week with well, kind of a funny thing. Bill O'Reilly got fired from Fox News. Now, so Bill O'Reilly gets fired from Fox News, and you know, as on his way out, he gets a $25 million severance. So I mean, that's kind of ass backwards, right? Like, how is it that hey, you know, you're fired, but here's $25 million on your way out? It's like all of the women
raise while you're at it.
Yeah. Here's like something that must be nice, you know. It's like all the women that were complaining to Bill O'Reilly for sexual harassment, all together, I think it was like, I don't know how many women it was. I know it was more than 10. They all got just $13 million all together, right? Bill O'Reilly got $25 million when he got fired from Fox News. I'm definitely doing something wrong in the world. But anyway, and that's not really a small deal, you know. This isn't like Peter, whatever his name was, who lied about the helicopter ride getting fired from ABC. This isn't like us losing Keith Olbermann or Megyn Kelly. You know, Bill O'Reilly's a big deal. Bill O'Reilly carries a lot of weight. He's like the voice in like cable news at night, you know. So and I keep promising everybody we're gonna do a Fox News show, and we definitely are, because I mean, I gotta just put it together. I gotta produce something pretty cool for it. But you know, the Fox News things goes really deep. It's not just some on the surface type of shit. I mean, Fox News is really, it's like you know, it's the close. I don't know. I don't want to say it's a cult, but the way that Roger Ailes and Rupert Murdoch and all of them set it up, it's on some Jim Jones type stuff. So, but we'll talk about that in another episode, of course. Also, too, North Korea. This thing with North Korea is getting deeper and deeper and deeper. Today, they kind of gave us a little bit of a quasi message, and they said, you know, if you mess with us, we're going to retaliate. That could be them just kind of boasting, but you know, Mike Pence went to the demilitarization zone, which is the border that separates North and South Korea, and he went there this week and stared through with some goggles and kind of did his whole thing. You know, a lot of people are actually asking me this week, you know, what's the deal with North Korea? Like, what is it? What's this beef all about? You know, and you know, a lot of people don't know. I got into it a little bit when we talked about it, but you know, a lot of people really don't know. So it's kind of like nothing and everything at the same time, right? Because all North Korea really has been doing is testing out ballistic missiles and things like that. They haven't, technically speaking, tried to launch them at anybody. Be that as it may, you know, their whole argument is, you know, who is the United States to tell us that we can't have nuclear weapons? And North Korea is an isolated state. You know, they don't bother nobody. They don't want to have anything to do with anybody. The thing about it is, you know, after World War II, North Korea became a theater for a proxy war because Japan used to run Korea. But after World War II and Japan got defeated, you know, they had to give Korea up, and it was given up to the United States and Russia. And Russia had the North, and the United States had the South. And, you know, it was the communists versus the non-communists, which is what the Korean War was. And, you know, short story long, that beef goes all the way back because we pretty much obliterated North Korea. And sometime in the 2003 or some point like that, George W. Bush got on TV, and he talked about the axis of evil. And he was talking about Iraq. I think the other one was Russia, but the other one was definitely North Korea. And the first Kim Jong whatever, the first one before this one, Kim Jong-un, I think it was, he saw what we did to Iraq. And, you know, his whole thing is, you're not doing that shit here. So North Korea, you know, they decided to start beefing up their arsenal. That's not to defend them, excuse me. You know, Kim Jong-il he's definitely got a screw loose. But yeah, that's a lot what that's about, and it's been like that ever since. So we'll see what happens when it comes to that whole thing. But, you know, we'll definitely have to stay tuned because that's a huge story. So I'm a little nervous. I mean, you know, I don't want World War III to happen, but like I said, I'm a glass half full kind of guy. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, best way I can describe it, right?
Pretty much.
Just got to kind of laugh at it a little bit. But anyway, to kind of get into like the main thing that happened tonight. So when I was driving on my way in here, I had to come down Sunset Boulevard. And when you first get into the Palisades, there's this huge sign sticking up that says, Los Angeles votes on May 16th, right? And I'm just kind of looking at it like, damn, that's kind of funny. Yo, we just had an election. It's like we are having all these elections back and forth, and you know, it's hard for a lot of people to keep up with. But you know, but you know, that's part of democracy. That's part of what it takes to have a thriving democracy. This idea of you know, things constantly changing and having to constantly get involved in the process is how democracy actually works, right? And so, you know, when you really think about it, well, actually, I'll tell you a story too, and one more before I get into the main segment. So we have this election coming up on May 16th. It's actually a runoff election because of the last election we had. And so I got a sample ballot in the mail, and my sample ballot only had one measure on it. So I have to go on May 16th and vote for one thing. Yeah, that's how minuscule these elections sometimes can be. But it's like, it's an important measure. It's Measure C in Los Angeles County, which is the review. It's for a citizen's review of police misconduct versus the police reviewing it. So, I mean, that could be a good thing. So if you live in LA County, please go out and vote on May 16th. But still, it's just like, voter fatigue is a big thing. But that's what it takes to be a citizen, right? I mean, that's what citizenship kind of encompasses in our country. And that kind of brings me to my next point. So last week we talked about that election that happened in Kansas, right? Where it was a special election where I forget the guy's name, but he almost won in a traditionally the Democratic candidate almost won in a traditionally red area. And also too, we talked about the special election that happened in Georgia, which took place this last Tuesday, right? So, and by the way, last week on this show, I said it was a Senate race. I meant to say it was a House race. I misspoke.
And he also meant Kim Jong-il when he said Kim Jong-un, and Kim Jong-un when he said Kim Jong-il.
You see? That's why, exactly. That's why I'll never make fun of Sean Spicer again.
Fact checkers in the house.
Yep, right. Us and our iPhones.
As we should. But, anyway. But, yeah, so that particular special election, right, that happened last week in Georgia was the Georgia 6th election, right? There was this young guy who comes along. His name is John Ossoff. We talked about it a little bit, right? Now, this part of Georgia is right outside of Atlanta, and it is traditionally Republican as hell. I mean, it's ruby red. They haven't had a Democratic congressperson there for, I think, about 30 years or something like that. And then Donald Trump won this area by, like, leaps and bounds, right? So we have this special election that happens because the seat has to be filled in Georgia for Congress. Now, like I said, these elections happen all the time, right? Something took place in this election where people finally, I think, understood the power of we need to get involved. Because the Democrat, who is a nobody, who is running in a traditionally red area, got 48% or 46% of the vote, or something along those lines. I hate being human. It forced a damn it. It forced a runoff election. A runoff election, meaning they have to vote again in June. But he's going to go up against the Republican, but the Republican runner-up didn't even get half of what he got. There were like 4 or 5 other people running in that election. 3 of them were Democrats. Altogether, the Democrats got more than 50% of the vote. Which means if Democrats just simply show up again in June, they can take that district. We can flip that district. Now, a lot of people think this has to do with the Donald Trump phenomena. And I believe that's true. That has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I think that Donald Trump, where we saw during the election a lot of traditionally blue areas turn red.
Yeah.
And so I think it was a bit of a wake-up call to Democrats that if Republicans can do that in blue areas, then they can do that in red areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it kind of lit a fire up under everybody's ass a little bit and helped them kind of realize that, getting involved in the democratic process is such a vital part of not just citizenship, but almost of survival, that it's not even funny. I mean, it took to have making that wave for that to happen. And it wasn't just some small time thing. It wasn't just a political thing. A lot of people, even people who aren't really involved in the political world, knew about that election in Georgia. And it's a congressional race, right? That kind of, there's this book called The Gardens of Democracy by this author named Eric Liu and another one named Eric Honor. It's a really amazing book. I definitely recommend it. I'm not big on recommending books, but that's one I definitely recommend. And in the book, The Gardens of Democracy, Eric Liu and Nick Honor kind of describe this idea of what it really takes to have a world where government works by the people and for the people, right? They introduced this theory called machine brain versus garden brain, where they say that machine brain is kind of a concept that most Americans have. I'll read a little excerpt from it. It says, machine brain sees the world and democracy as a series of mechanisms, clocks and gears, perpetual motion machines, balances and counterbalances. Machine brain requires you to conceive of the economy as perfectly efficient and automatically self-correcting. Machine brain presupposes stability and predictability and only grudgingly admits the need for correction. Even the word commonly used for such correction, regulation, is mechanical in origin and regrettable in connotation. So basically what they're saying is this idea of machine brain kind of puts the state of mind in place where government kind of works like a machine. Gavin Newsom talked about this in his book Citizenville, where he said that people treat government like a machine in a sense where you put money in and expect to get something out. And when you get junk out, you kind of just kick the machine, right? When it doesn't work. Versus another theory they talk about called garden brain, where it says garden brain sees the world and democracy as an entwined set of ecosystems, sinks and sources of trust and social capital, webs of economic growth, networks of behavioral
Continuity?
Yeah, no. Contingent. I just can't talk right now. Contingent. Garden brain forces you to conceive of the economy as man-made and effective only if well-constructed and well-cared for. Garden brain presupposes instability and unpredictability and thus expects a continuous need for seeding, feeding, and weeding ever-changing systems. So in other words, this idea of the garden brain within the American psyche treats government as a garden, not like a machine.
As something that needs to be nurtured in order to flourish.
Exactly. Something that needs to be looked after. Something that we as gardeners, as citizens of this society, need to go in and take part in. And I think that's what happened in Georgia this last Tuesday. That's what needs to continue to happen. So, anyway, we'll be right back
to the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. Follow us by visiting MikeRileyNow.com.
If you're watching us on Facebook Live right now, we do like selfie poses in between the breaks. So feel free to take a picture. It'll last a lot longer. All right. Anyway, y'all didn't know I'm doing stand up after tonight. Oh, we forgot to shout out Brooke Doherty, the executive producer of Young Angels Network. Please, y'all log on to youngangelsnetwork.org and make sure that you follow us. We got a brand new little area there with my face all over it, and I happen to love my face. Yep.
Be glad he's on podcast.
Exactly, right? All right, let's get into some news of the week. Let me just go through my notes here. Let's talk about these elections that are happening in other parts of the world. There's a big election happening in France.
L'élection française.
Yeah, the election française, right? And there's another big election happening in Iran in the next couple of weeks here. So the one in France is happening on I think it's Sunday or something like that. Yeah, it's actually happening pretty soon.
Yeah.
Now this election is as Joe Biden would say, a BFD.
This is a really big deal, and
Yeah.
I know a lot of people, especially in America, aren't paying attention to it the way that we need to.
That's
It's-
the case in all things
But
not
like
to do with America.
this one's so important
Right.
that I don't know,
Yeah, well, I think this proves, because for those of you who don't know, someone who's running and is getting an awful lot of popularity
it's like
is
the
another
female version.
a right
Version of
extremist.
Trump.
Yes,
Yeah.
She's
and
literally the female version
Yeah.
of Trump, and her father was even scarier.
Mm.
Even though she's denounced it from her party, she's actually the one that kicked him out of the party.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
Wow.
she's actually the one that kicked him out. I can't remember her name.
Her name is Marine Le Pen.
There we go. She actually kicked her father out of the head of the party because he was,
way too extreme.
Yes, way too
Wow.
extreme. And so she's trying to kind of mainstream the ideas that were at the core of the party, but she's just basically a Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing is a rise in this new wave of extreme rightism. It's, you see it in America with the election of Trump. You see it in Britain with the referendum vote on Brexit. We see all of these rightist polls that are being won. And this bodes a new opportunity for it to take over again. And soon this is going to be an entire global wave of just extreme national.
It almost happened in the Netherlands. It almost happened. It almost
in
happened
one of the
in
most
Germany.
democratic areas
Right,
in the
exactly.
world.
I
It nearly
want
happened.
to kind of take a look at it, and you know how there's like the joke in Europe that America's so stupid and like we would never make their mistakes.
Right.
And so I think a lot of what is going into the elections is that people are like, oh, well, we're not going to make their mistakes, so we don't need to like take the same precautions. We don't all have to go vote because we're obviously not going to make that kind of mistake because we're not America.
Yeah. I mean, America has that same kind of attitude that we,
yes, but then this is like several different countries that all have the mentality, and if all of these countries have this mentality, then it's really, like, it's just really hard to, like, if the whole Europe, all of Europe thinks that the U.S. is just stupid and we're going to not make the same mistake, they are, though.
Well, I personally think that this thing is starting to spread all across Europe.
like
It's
a
almost like it's
virus.
becoming
Yeah.
contagious. It's like a
It
virus.
is a plague.
Yeah,
It's
it is.
a little uncomfortable.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the things that's really fueling it, like Marine Le Pen, one of the reasons why she's so popular and one of the reasons why she's kind of soaring above her competition is because she is focusing a lot on, first of all, she wants to leave the EU. She hates the EU. if France leaves the EU, and
the EU is done.
It's done. It's over. The euro's over. There is going to be no more euro.
They're going to go back to the franc?
Shit, they'll probably make up something new, man. You know, who knows? But the EU, the euro, they're tinkering on this. So this idea of a Frexit is a huge thing. Also, too, there's the problem with immigration. Marine Le Pen, she's pushing big on the immigration issue because of the refugee crisis that's taking place all across Europe due to the unrest in the Middle East. Just like what's happening here in America, this anti-immigration thing is huge in France.
And it also, when Brexit happened, before this whole Frexit incident, it was being forwarded by the UK Independence Party, UKIP, who were extremely anti-immigration for the same kind of reasons. They're taking jobs, we're getting a huge influx because of what's happening in the Middle East, and it's being repeated again and again and again, and people aren't people in England all see what Brexit has done. You know, our economy plummeted at certain points, and everyone's realised what a huge mistake they've made, and yet France somehow is looking at it with rose-tinted glasses. Like, oh, it's fine.
It's one of those things where maybe they haven't experienced it yet. You know, unemployment in France is about 10% right now. Mm-hmm. That's a big deal to them. They have, like I said, they're dealing with their immigration issues. There's a lot on it. There's a New York Times article that talks about everything you need to know about the elections in France. And I'm telling you, all people here in the good old-fashioned red, white, and blue, red and blue and white, I guess that's independent, alike. No. This is a big deal. We need to be paying attention to what's going on in France. They're just like our elections affect the rest of the world, so do other elections affect us. Also, too, there's an election happening in Iran in a couple of weeks as well. This is another BFD. The current president of Iran, whose name I will never know how to pronounce, Ahmadinejad. No, it's not Ahmadinejad. It's the other guy. God, I forget his name. He's one of the new guys, but he's the one that basically negotiated the Iran deal. The one that him and Barack Obama put together. And he's kind of the one who fostered this idea that Iran will, disarm itself, will get rid of its nuclear program in the sense of building a weapon, and that it was going to just focus on building peace. Rex Tillerson, our Secretary of State. Oh, yes, Hassan Rouhani. Yes. Hassan Rouhani, yes. Awesome. Yes, that's the guy. I'm sorry. And yeah, but he was the one that kind of helped put together and construct the Iran deal that Donald Trump wants to tear apart. Basically anything Barack Obama did, Donald Trump has campaigned on tearing it apart. So we'll see what happens there. But having an extremist get in the way, in the wake of that, could be a big problem for us. And also along with that, Rex Tillerson, our Secretary of State, called Iran a state sponsor of terror, which may be true to a certain degree. But you also have us, like I said before, we're friends with Saudi Arabia, who's an even bigger state sponsor of terror. So it's just something that's a little ironic to me. But we'll see what happens. These elections, both in France and Iran, are a big deal.
France, Iran, ne soyez pas stupide. Do not be stupid.
That was so awesome. That was pretty awesome. I wish I knew how to speak French. All right, let's.
Did you just say?
I wish I knew how to speak France.
No, I said I wish. Yeah,
I wish you knew how to speak English.
I wish I knew how to speak American.
She speaks Mexican. I can't understand her. No, I had a friend say that once. I was speaking Mexican. All right. Anyway, let's get on to the next story. Submarines. Now, okay. Donald Trump.
That's a jump.
Huh?
I thought you said submarines. Just
no. See, I can speak English, contrary to popular belief. But submarines. We're going to talk about submarines here for a minute. So, up until 2010, it was against the law for women to serve on submarines in the U.S. Navy, right? So women cannot serve on submarines. I'm sure the Navy had their reasons. I'm not going to get into why. That's none of my business. But now women can serve on submarines, right? So when Donald Trump and the Trump administration, decided to increase the military budget, what that means, it usually means that it goes to the contractors, the people who build our ships, our submarines, who make our bombs. We just dropped $59 million in Syria a couple weeks ago, and it didn't really do anything. Shit happens, right? But the interesting story is that this defense contracting company down in San Diego got a contract from the U.S. government, and they're going to start building submarines that accommodate to women. Apparently, submarines haven't been very accommodating to women over the years, and this company is going to actually take the time and actually do it. I thought that was a pretty interesting story. I'll definitely post it up on MikeRileyNow.com. Sorry we don't have more time to get into it, but we'll definitely talk about it one of these other days. All right, y'all. We'll be right back here on the other side of the break. This is the Mike Riley Now podcast here on the Young Angels of America Network. Speak good English.
You are listening to the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. Follow us by visiting MikeRileyNow.com.
Yes. All right, y'all. Welcome back to the Mike Riley Now podcast here on the Young Angels of America Network. Thank you to every single last individual who's tuning in from all over the place, who's tuning in on Facebook, everybody who's tuning in on iTunes, on Spreaker, everybody who's listening to us on iHeartRadio, everybody listening to us on Google Play, on all the platforms. Thank you so much. Log on to MikeRileyNow.com. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Drop me a line. Hit me up on Twitter. Hit me up on Facebook and all the cool stuff. Earth Day is coming up this Saturday. So if you have some plans for Earth Day, tweet me, hit me up on Facebook, let me know. I think I'm going to the scientific march, the science march happening downtown.
Please do go, guys. Seriously.
Yeah, that's going to be a big deal. The scientists are marching to combat climate change and to let the Trump administration know that climate change actually exists and that it is a very, very dire situation and we need to do something about it. That is something that's pretty for Earth Day. I think that's something that is huge because it has everything to do with Earth. So if you have no plans for this Earth Day and you live in LA or anywhere in the LA area, come on downtown. I'll post the flyer up on MikeRileyNow.com and you guys can come and check it out. So, all right, cool. All right, let's get into some economics. A lot of things economically have been taking place over the last week or so. I mean, a lot of big things. One of the bigger things that happened this week was Donald Trump signed an executive order this week that pretty much states, it's one of these things where it pretty much states to hire American and buy American, right? Now, it's kind of a tricky thing that he kind of made on the deal. Basically, one of his campaign promises, or one of the ways he wants to boost up the economy, is by creating this. He created this executive order that states that if the federal government wants to contract anybody, it has to be an American company. And if the federal government wants to hire anybody to build any of these things or to manufacture any of these things that the federal government is putting together, they have to hire American workers. Okay. Now, there's a lot of irony in that, of course, because I think everything Donald Trump manufactures is manufactured in China, and all of his people that worked on his hotels, most of them were not from here. But whatever. I'm not gonna He just says he was a smart businessman. I guess there's a little bit of hypocrisy in that. But be that as it may, this is supposed to, what this law is supposed to do, what this executive order is supposed to do, is it's supposed to rally up this economic growth for the United States. Now, there's a lot of people are saying that this is kind of a double-sided coin. It's not necessarily going to work. There's a lot of loopholes that are in it. Really, it really doesn't change a lot of things. Really, what it's going to do is it's just going to force the federal government to investigate and look further into ways that it can buy American and hire American versus actually doing it. But the reason I bring this up is because what is it with nationalism in the economy, right? Okay, so people who are anti-globalist, like Donald Trump, for example, had this argument, and I think I've talked about this before on the show a couple of times, where if we outsource our goods and services and our raw materials, it'll go to a cheaper workforce. And then American companies can no longer compete. You know, if I'm a shoe man, if I'm a person who makes shoes or whatever, me and Charlie got the shoe factory, or me and Charlie got a chocolate factory. How about that? That sounds like it fits better.
That's so funny.
Yeah, me and Charlie got a chocolate factory. So me and Charlie make chocolate, and our chocolate we make each chocolate bar here in the United States for $1 or $2 a pop. It makes
cheap,
it,
man.
Yeah, and it costs us $5 to sell it, so we make a $3 profit. Okay, cool. But Cam is our competition, and Cam opens up. She says, "But you know what? You got to pay your workers like $35 an hour. You got to do all this other stuff." So I'm taking my chocolate factory and I'm hauling it on back to China or to Mexico or to Paraguay.
I am a bad person in this scenario?
You own Cam's Confectionaries.
Duh.
Okay.
Sweetest sugar this side of the Mississippi. Yes, it is. But Cam's chocolate factory is set up in a place where they don't have to compete for those wages. They don't have to deal with the environmental regulations, right? Which is why it's funny that Donald Trump, being that he's a Republican, signed a deal like this, because it kind of goes against those types of things, right? I mean, one of the main reasons that these big companies outsource in the first place is because they don't like dealing with things that Democrats put on the table,
such as carbon taxes
or fair wages,
cap and trade systems,
labor unions, things like that are why Americans are why a lot of companies leave, because you can't treat Americans like that, right? But anyway, back to the nationalism. So that particular idea of nationalism within an economic system, how I want to know what you guys think. Do you think something like that can actually work? We have to get stuff from the world's a big place, right? We have to trade with the rest of the world at some, to some degree. And we can't make and manufacture everything here. And so a lot of companies are kind of saying this, are kind of tinkering on this idea that this high in America, make in America thing isn't really going to work, based off of the fact that a lot of these companies aren't going to just drop what they're doing.
Well, and I mean, every American can go on thinking that America is the only country in the world, but economically that just doesn't work out. We can't keep acting like if we create this entire global system that we have going now and we just condense it to just America, that's going to work.
Exactly.
Because our economy thrives on the fact that other people's economies are different and they all work together in a complex system, and you can't just cut America off.
Right. We can't North Korea ourselves, in other words.
Exactly. We can't North Korea ourselves. It's communism.
Yeah. And on top of that, on top of that, there's an article, I think it was in the New York Times about this, where it talked about, or it was in the New Yorker, excuse me. There's 571, something odd or some million odd job openings in the United States for things that are kind of considered manufacturing, except for a lot of Americans don't contain the skill set necessary to work those jobs. Manufacturing isn't like what it used to be back in the 50s and 60s and 70s and shit, where you're just screwing something on a car. A lot of these things involve more complex computers, machines, things that people have to go to tech school or trade school to kind of learn. But when you slash an education budget and you don't put things that kind of go towards that, how are Americans supposed to have the tools necessary to go out there and get and actually, be able to perform these jobs? There are job openings, but people, Americans can't work them. That's why we have H-1B1 bills, visa bills, and things like that. A lot of these companies have to end up outsourcing outside of the country just to get the talent necessary that they need in order to get the job done. So and for those of you who don't know what an H-1B1 visa bill is, that's basically a bill that kind of states that companies can hire a certain amount of can bring in a certain amount of immigrants from other countries on a working visa, and they can work for the state company, especially in the tech world. That's a big one.
Yeah, this new legislation, it seems a little bit like a twisted version of affirmative action. You know, just kind of this, for at least Americans, this positive discrimination. In what way, you think? Like, well, you know, because affirmative action was all about, for those of you who don't know, when particularly in schooling systems, we got rid of the quota system, but it was basically like if you're first generation or if you're from a minority, you have a sort of positive discrimination going to that college. Right. And it seems like they've kind of created this affirmative action system for Americans getting jobs now. So if you have the same qualifications as someone who is
I see what you're saying.
Not from America, you're going to be given the job because you're American. Right. And, you know, and a lot of people really voted for Donald Trump based off of what you just said. You know, we want, like I said, it's nationalism. We want America to be number one when it comes to our own jobs and things like that. And there's a certain element of that I do agree with. But at the same time, you know, are we going to move forward with that type of economy? Are we really going to have a manufacturing-based economy in the future? Can we rely on that? What about automation? What about things like that? These are really a lot of questions we really got to ask ourselves. So it's all pretty interesting. We'll talk about it some more. I kind of want to talk about the weed thing a little bit. So today is 420, and I really wanted to kind of dedicate a little bit of time to this. Now, 420 obviously is for all you people out there. I don't think anybody doesn't know what it is. But, I mean, there are a couple lame people out there, I guess. Charlie's one of them. Charlie's a lame. Doesn't know I'm a lame.
But,
Charlie, you have to join the hip, cool young
kids. Man. All the kids are doing it nowadays. But
peer pressure.
But the 420 thing kind of sheds a little bit more light on cannabis or weed or whatever you want to call it, pot. More so than just smoking it, right? And just kind of getting stoned or whatever else the case may be. There is for the first time in like American history, the consensus on both sides of the aisle on pot is completely changing. You know, more Americans agree with decriminalizing it and legalizing it more than ever before. I think it's like 70% of Americans believe in decriminalizing it. I think there's like 80% of Americans believe that in the medicinal aspect of it. Most Americans agree that it's less dangerous than alcohol. You know, nobody's ever died from it, from a weed overdose. That's for damn sure.
Because it's not physically possible
to do it. Exactly. From a libertarian point of view, even if you will, you know, if you're able to grow something like a plant in your own home and you're able to, you know, understand the botany of it and you're able to, regulate it, the usage and understand the usage, then the government really has no business getting in between that. Now, if it's something that's mixed with a chemical and you're giving it out to the public and it has some sort of synthetic,
waste,
like cocaine or heroin or something like that, then the people should have some say so in that. But on the flip side, that's what it's become. Not to mention, there's an entire industry that is springing up around cannabis, right? I mean, economically speaking, it gets places booming. I mean, look at Colorado and Washington, for the love of God. Colorado is becoming queen of the boom towns mainly because of pot. The same thing happened in Washington. It's about to happen here in California. We just recreationally legalized ours. And
what I think the most impressive thing is that in Colorado, I believe the kind of rate of getting arrested for some sort of cannabis thing. Mm-hmm. In Colorado, it was 58%, I believe. It went down.
Wow.
And then in Washington, it was 90%.
Yeah, less people are and getting in trouble.
Which is like great because there's also like kind of a race thing intertwined.
Oh, 100%.
Which I think we can dedicate an entire episode to.
Oh, yeah, we really can.
I think it would be super interesting to do that. but so it's just like kind of amazing that all this kind of stuff is changing based on just kind of a plant almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think those that, resist it, obviously aren't people that do it, but
right.
I don't understand why you would resist it. I'm someone that doesn't, but I still believe in, the decriminalization of it and legalization of it, because looking at it from, like you said, a purely economic standpoint, it's hugely beneficial.
Oh, absolutely.
It's hugely, and just because you don't do it doesn't mean that you should then, take away everyone else's rights to do it. I choose not to do it, but that doesn't mean that other people should then not have that choice.
Well, people smoke cigarettes, and everybody seems to be somewhat okay with that, and they're way more dangerous than weed will ever be. And on top of that, if you understand the botany of it, I mean, the female plant is where you get the buds, and that's where the things that you pick, and that's where you get high. But the male plant doesn't bud, it doesn't produce the buds. But the hemp from the male plant is so resourceful. You can make anything out of hemp.
Oh, hemp is really great for you, and on so many levels. They make like hemp shampoo, they make face washes, they make all kinds of
lotion, deodorant, and shit.
And they actually
clothes.
Actually
they make clothes, belts.
There's actually a line which is a little bit more on the it's a little bit strange to talk about, but there's actually a line for women that get really awful cramps.
Like menstrual.
Menstrual cramps, or like.
Right.
There's actually a disorder that you can get where you have really strong emotional kind of scale that you slide back and forth. It's almost kind of like a bipolar kind of thing, but it's only when you're on your period. And they actually have found that certain byproducts of using hemp and certain parts of the marijuana plant actually help it immensely and completely change these women's lives, because some women are completely... They can't leave their entire house for a week, and it's an amazing thing. And I think a lot of people are ignoring the quite positive sides to kind of normalizing this as like a product. Right?
Yeah. I mean, and you're right, Cam. We can dedicate an entire show to like reefer madness and where the whole scary thing behind marijuana kind of came from, and the racism that's involved in it, and the people that go to jail over it, and everything like that. So and there are a lot of benefits to it, so I mean, I think we should definitely take a look into that. All right, y'all, well, that is our show for today. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for laughing with us and kicking it with us. Happy 420. Thanks. God bless Charlie, God bless Cam, God bless Brooke, God bless all of y'all. You know what to do. Go on to MikeRileyNow.com and make sure that you subscribe. Make sure that you follow me. And please remember, quoting a great scholar, that democracy is not a spectator sport. It involves you. We all must get in this. We're all in this together. Do your responsibility as a citizen and get involved in the process. This is more than just politics. It's survival. It's part of being human. All right, y'all. So that's pretty much the gist of it. All right, we'll see y'all next. Oh, no, that's my line. All right, y'all.
You are listening to the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. Follow us by visiting MikeRileyNow.com.